First week of the month, scripture, right? And those of you who were here last month will remember that since we had the precept ceremony coming up, we usually go back and forth between the early Buddhist Pali language texts and the later Sanskrit language Mahayana texts. But last month, with the precept ceremony coming up, we kind of looked at both, right? Examples of texts from both traditions that had to do with the precepts. So I'm going to do something kind of similar tonight. I'm going to tell you 3 stories and then talk a little bit about some things afterwards that, again, come from those two different traditions. So we're actually going to start with something related to the Dhammapada, for those of you who have been taking part in the Dhammapada classes. This actually is not from the Dhammapada itself. It's from the commentary, one of the commentaries written about the Dhammapada. The 43rd verse of the Dhammapada, which we've already gone past, so you probably remember this one. What one's mother, what one's father, whatever other kin may do, the well-directed mind indeed can do one greater good. Now, this commentary about that verse, this is the story of Saraya. While residing at the Jetavana monastery, the Buddha spoke this verse, the verse from the Dhammapada, with reference to Saraya, the son of a rich man of the city of Saraya. On one occasion, Saraya, accompanied by a friend and some attendants, was going out in a carriage for a bath. At that moment, monk Mahakachayana was adjusting his robe outside the city, and he was going into the city of Saraya for alms food. The youth Saraya, seeing the youthful complexion of the monk, thought, "How I wish the monk were my wife, so that the complexion of my wife would be like his." As this wish arose in him, his sex changed, and he became a woman. Very much ashamed, he got down from the carriage and ran away, taking the road to Taxila. His companions looked for him, but they could not find him. Saraya, now a woman, offered her signet ring to some people going to Taxila to allow her to go with them in their carriage. Upon arrival at Taxila, her companions told a young rich man of Taxila about the lady who had come along with them. The young rich man, finding her to be very beautiful and of a suitable age for him, married her. As a result of this marriage, 2 sons were born. There were also 2 sons from the previous marriage of Saraya as a man. One day, a rich man's son from the city of Saraya came to Taxila with a caravan of 500 carts. Lady Saraya, recognizing him to be an old friend, sent for him. The man from Saraya was surprised that he was invited because he did not know the lady who invited him. He told the Lady Saraya that he did not know her and asked her whether she knew him. She answered that she knew him and also inquired after the health of her family and other people in the city of Saraya. The man from Saraya next told her about the rich man's son who disappeared mysteriously while going for a bath. Then the Lady Saraya revealed her identity and related all that had happened about the wrongful thoughts with regard to monk Mahakachayana and about the change of sex and her marriage to the young rich man of Taxila. The man from the city of Saraya then advised the Lady Saraya to ask pardon from the monk. Monk Mahakachayana was accordingly invited to the home of Saraya, and alms food was offered to him. After the meal, the Lady Saraya was brought to the presence of the monk, and the man from Saraya told the monk that the lady was at one time the son of a rich man from Saraya. He then explained to the monk how Saraya was turned into a female on account of his wrongful thoughts toward the respected monk. Lady Saraya then respectfully asked pardon of monk Mahakachayana. The monk then said, "Get up, I forgive you." As soon as these words were spoken, the woman was changed back to a man. Saraya then pondered how, within a single existence and with a single body, he had undergone change of sex, and how sons were born to him. And feeling very weary and repulsive of all these things, he decided to leave the householder's life and join the Sangha under the monk. After that, he was often asked, "Whom do you love more, the 2 sons you had as a man or the 2 you had as a woman?" To those he would answer that his love for those born as a woman was greater. This question was put to him so often he felt very much annoyed and ashamed. So he stayed by himself and with diligence contemplated the decay and dissolution of the body. He soon attained arhatship together with the analytical insight. When the old question was next put to him, he replied that he had no affection for anyone in particular. Other monks hearing him thought he must be telling a lie. When it was reported about Saraya giving a different answer, the Buddha said, "My son is not telling lies, he is speaking the truth." This next story is small part of the 12th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, which is from the Mahayana tradition. This is following a section where the Buddha is talking about the future births of his cousin Devadatta, who spent years being a thorn in his side and sort of causing trouble within the Sangha. At that time, Manjushri, sitting on a 1,000-petaled lotus flower as large as a carriage wheel, Manjushri, Bodhisattva of wisdom, together with attendant bodhisattvas also seated on jeweled lotus flowers, emerged spontaneously out of the ocean from the palace of the Naga king Sagara and floated in midair. Arriving at Mount Gridagatu, they descended from the lotus flowers and went into the presence of the Buddhas, where they bowed until their foreheads touched the feet of both Bhagavats. Having honored them, Manjushri approached Prajnakuta. They greeted each other and withdrew to sit at one side. Then Bodhisattva Prajnakuta asked Manjushri, saying, "Your Eminence, how many sentient beings did you lead and inspire at the palace of the Naga king?" Manjushri answered, "The number is immeasurable and incalculable. It is not possible to express it in words, nor is it possible to calculate it with one's mind. Wait a moment and you will have proof." Before he had finished speaking, innumerable bodhisattvas emerged from the ocean, seated on jeweled lotus flowers. Arriving on Mount Gridagatu, they floated in midair. All of these were bodhisattvas who had been led and inspired by Manjushri. Those who had perfected the bodhisattva practices discussed the 6 perfections together. Those who were originally Shravakas explained the Shravaka practice in the air, and now they all practiced to understand the meaning of the emptiness of the Mahayana. Manjushri said to Prajnakuta, "Thus did I lead and inspire people in the ocean." Thereupon Bodhisattva Prajnakuta spoke these verses in praise. "O one of great wisdom, virtue, and courage, this assembly and I have now all witnessed that you have led and inspired incalculable numbers of sentient beings. You have expounded the essential character of dharmas and revealed the teaching of the single vehicle. You have extensively led many sentient beings, causing them to quickly attain enlightenment." Manjushri said, "In the ocean I always expounded only the Lotus Sutra." Then Prajnakuta questioned Manjushri, saying, "This sutra is profound and subtle. It is a jewel among sutras and rare in the world. If sentient beings diligently strive to practice this sutra, will they immediately become Buddhas or not?" Manjushri answered, "Yes, they will. There is the daughter of the Naga king, Sagara, who is only 8 years old. She is wise, her faculties are sharp, and she also well knows all the faculties and deeds of sentient beings. She has attained the power of recollection. She preserves all the profound secret treasures taught by the Buddhas, enters deep meditation, and is well capable of discerning all dharmas. She instantly produced the thought of enlightenment and attained the stage of non-retrogression. She has unhindered eloquence and thinks of sentient beings with as much compassion as if they were her own children. Her virtues are perfect. Her thoughts and explanations are subtle and extensive, merciful and compassionate. She has a harmonious mind and has attained enlightenment." The Bodhisattva Prajnakuta said, "I see the Tathagata Shakyamuni, who has been incessantly carrying out difficult and severe practices for immeasurable kalpas, accumulating merit and virtue while seeking the Bodhisattva path. Looking into the great manifold cosmos, there is not a single place, even the size of a mustard seed, where this Bodhisattva has not abandoned his life for the sake of sentient beings. He attained the path to enlightenment only after this. It is hard to believe that this girl will instantly attain complete enlightenment." Before he had finished speaking, the daughter of the Naga king suddenly appeared in their presence. Bowing until her forehead touched their feet, she withdrew to one side and spoke these verses in praise. "The Buddha is deeply versed in the characteristics of good and evil, and he completely illuminates the 10 directions. His subtle and pure Dharma body is endowed with the 32 marks. With the 80 good characteristics is his Dharma body adorned. He is adored by devas and humans and honored by Nagas. There is no sentient being who does not pay him homage. Moreover, that I will attain enlightenment upon hearing him can only be known by a Buddha. I will reveal the teaching of the Mahayana and save suffering sentient beings." At that time, Shariputra spoke to the daughter of the Naga king, saying, "You say that you will soon attain the highest path. This is difficult to believe. Why is this? The female body is polluted. It is not a fit vessel for the Dharma. How can you attain the highest enlightenment?" "The Buddha path is long. One can only attain it after diligently carrying out severe practices and completely practicing the perfections over immeasurable kalpas. Moreover, the female body has 5 obstructions. The first is the inability to become a great Brahma. The second is the inability to become Shakra. The third is the inability to become Mara. And the fourth is the inability to become a universal monarch. The fifth is the inability to become a Buddha. How can you, with your female body, quickly become a Buddha? Then the daughter of the Naga king presented to the Buddha a jewel worth a great manifold cosmos, and the Buddha accepted it. The daughter of the Naga king spoke to Bodhisattva Prajnakuta and the noble Shariputra, saying, I offer a jewel to the Bhagavat, and the Bhagavat accepted it. Was that done quickly or not? They answered, saying it was done extremely quickly. The daughter said, through your transcendent powers, watch me become a Buddha even more quickly than that. Then the assembly there all saw the daughter of the Naga king instantly transform into a man, perfect the Bodhisattva practices, go to the Vimala world in the south, sit on a jeweled lotus flower, and attain highest complete enlightenment, become endowed with the 32 marks and 80 excellent characteristics, and expound the true Dharma universally for the sake of all sentient beings in the 10 directions. Then the Bodhisattvas, Shravakas, 8 kinds of Devas, Nagas, and so on, human and non-humans of the Saha world, all saw in the distance that the daughter of the Naga king had become a Buddha, and was universally teaching the Dharma for the sake of the humans and Devas in that assembly. They rejoiced greatly and honored her from afar. On hearing the Dharma, incalculable numbers of sentient beings became enlightened and attained the stage of non-retrogression. Incalculable numbers of sentient beings received the predictions of the path, and the Vimala world quaked in 6 ways. In the Saha world, 3,000 sentient beings attained the stage of non-retrogression, and 3,000 sentient beings in whom the thought of enlightenment had awakened received their predictions. The Bodhisattva Prajnakuta, Shariputra, and the entire assembly accepted and believed in silence. This third story is from another Mahayana Sutra. This is from the Vimalakirti Sutra. Vimalakirti, for those of you here, when I talked about the idea of this sutra, Vimalakirti is sort of the ideal lay person. And a lot of the conversation, a lot of the sutra is a conversation between Vimalakirti showing his wisdom and the monk Shariputra being slightly dense. Let's say it that way. Which you kind of got the sense from the last text too, right? In a lot of the Mahayana Sutras, Shariputra plays the role of the voice of sort of old-fashioned conservative denseness. That's kind of his function. At that time, there was a heavenly being, a goddess, in Vimalakirti's room, who, seeing these great men and hearing them expound the law, proceeded to make herself visible, and taking heavenly flowers, scattered them over the bodhisattvas and major disciples. When the flowers touched the bodhisattvas, they all fell to the floor at once, but when they touched the major disciples, they stuck to them and did not fall off. The disciples all tried to shake off the flowers through their supernatural powers, but they could not do so. At that time, the goddess said to Shariputra, "Why try to brush off the flowers?" "Such flowers are not in accordance with the law," he replied. "That's why I try to brush them off." The goddess said, "Don't say these flowers are not in accordance with the law. Why? Because the flowers make no such distinction. You and your thinking have made up these distinctions, that's all. If one who has left the household life to follow the Buddha's law makes such distinctions, that is not in accordance with the law. One must be without distinction to be in accordance with the law. Look at the bodhisattvas. The flowers do not stick to them because they have already cut off all thoughts of distinctions. Just as evil spirits are able to take advantage of a person who is beset by fear, so because you disciples are fearful of the cycle of birth and death, the senses of form, sound, smell, taste, and touch are able to take advantage of you. But once a person has done away with fear, then the 5 desires that arise from these senses will not be able to get at them. So long as one has not done away with all such entanglements, the flowers will not stick to him. But they will not stick to someone who has eliminated them all." Shariputra said, "Goddess, have you been staying in this room long?" She replied, "Venerable sir, my stay in this room is about as long as your attainment of emancipation." Shariputra said, "So you've been here a long time?" "Venerable sir," said the goddess, "how long has your attainment of emancipation been?" Shariputra was silent and did not answer. The goddess said, "With your great wisdom, venerable sir, why do you remain silent?" Shariputra replied, "Emancipation cannot be spoken of in words, therefore I do not know what I can say to you." The goddess said, "Words, writing, all are marks of emancipation. Why? Because emancipation is not internal, not external, and not in between. And words likewise are not internal, not external, and not in between. Therefore, Shariputra, you can speak of emancipation without putting words aside. Why? Because all things that exist are marks of emancipation." Shariputra said, doesn't emancipation mean putting aside lewdness, anger, and stupidity? The goddess said, the Buddha, addressing persons of overbearing arrogance, asserted that one must put aside lewdness, anger, and stupidity in order to gain emancipation. That is all. If he was addressing those who were free of overbearing arrogance, the Buddha asserted that the nature of lewdness, anger, and stupidity is emancipation itself. Shariputra said, excellent, excellent. Goddess, what have you seized on? What have you seen into that you speak with such eloquence? The goddess replied, I have seized on nothing, seen into nothing, and hence speak with eloquence. Why? If one claims to have seized on something or seen into something, then in the light of the Buddha's law, one is being overbearingly arrogant. Shariputra said, why don't you change out of this female body? The goddess replied, for the past 12 years I have been trying to take on female form, but in the end with no success. What is there to change? If a sorcerer were to conjure up a phantom woman and then someone asked her why she didn't change out of her female body, would that be any kind of reasonable question? No, said Shariputra, phantoms have no fixed form, so what would there be to change? The goddess said, all things are just the same. They have no fixed form. So why ask why I don't change out of my female form? At that time, the goddess employed her supernatural powers to change Shariputra into a goddess like herself, while she took on Shariputra's form. Then she asked, why don't you change out of this female body? Shariputra, now in the form of a goddess, replied, I don't know why I have suddenly changed and taken on a female body. The goddess said, Shariputra, if you can change out of this female body, then all women can change likewise. Shariputra, who is not a woman, appears in a woman's body. And the same is true of all women. Though they appear in women's bodies, they are not women. Therefore, the Buddha teaches that all phenomena are neither male nor female. Then the goddess withdrew her supernatural power, and Shariputra returned to his original form. The goddess said to Shariputra, where now is the form and shape of your female body? Shariputra said, the form and shape of my female body does not exist, yet does not exist. The goddess said, all things are just like that. They do not exist, yet do not exist. And that they do not exist, yet do not exist is exactly what the Buddha teaches. So, if you haven't figured it out, all three of those stories are emphasizing the point that gender is an idea. And in fact, there's a number of places in the Buddhist stories where people just change their gender. In fact, there's in the Vinaya, there's two separate stories in the Vinaya about a male monastic who suddenly becomes female and a female monastic who suddenly becomes male. And the Buddha's only response to that is, given that the rules are a little different for male monastics and female monastics, is to tell each of them, well, now you have to follow the rules for the gender that you are now, as opposed to the gender you were before, and that's it, and it's no big deal, right? So there's a clear kind of idea that's present in a lot of the Buddhist sutras that gender is a very flexible thing, and in fact can change from one time to the next. If you haven't figured out why I'm talking about this, it's June, right? It's Pride Month, so that's the reason why we're talking about this. So since we're on the theme, oops, I have that one doesn't mean anything. False alarm. I have on this paper everything that's in the sutras about sexual orientation, about homosexuality, about same-sex behavior. Everything that's in the sutras is in this paper, on this piece of paper. I'm going to show it to you right now. Now, the really interesting thing about this is if we just turn it upside down, there's everything Jesus said about homosexuality and sexual orientation and same-sex behavior. If you think about it in a Buddhist context, in a sense, all sexuality is a problem, in effect. I mean, if you think about the fact that in Buddhism, there is obviously there's an idealization of celibacy, right? And as the ultimate expression of non-attachment, right? Then that all attachment is problematic, and in the Vinaya, in the rules for the monastics, There's no distinction made about whose body is with whose, right? Then Vinny actually says if a male monastic inserts his penis into any orifice of any person, he's immediately out. It doesn't matter. There's no distinction made between male or female or anything like that. Given that there's no distinction and the neutrality of the Buddhist teaching on sexual orientation, most people would say is fairly obvious. There's a little debate about that among certain circles, but most people would say there's no distinction that's made, right? Sexuality is the most important thing about sexuality, think about it in the context of the precepts, is that sexuality is not used harmfully, right? That we don't harm people through sexuality. And that's the only thing that really matters. That's the only thing that's really a distinction. There are certainly examples if in Buddhist cultures in Asia of cultures that have issues with sexual orientation. But if you look at them, what you can see is the origin of those issues are either coming from Confucianism, the influence of Confucianism, or in some cases, the influence of the British when the British were there and those countries were colonized by the British and sort of British Victorian kind of things, right? So in South Korea, because of the Confucian influence primarily, South Korea is a very traditional conservative culture, and same-sex marriage is not legal there. There's more and more tolerance of same-sex relationships and more openness about it increasingly, but it's still not something that's legal, though it is certainly in some other places. In South and East Asia that are Buddhist, Taiwan notably, this same-sex marriage is legal there. But even though same-sex marriage is not legal in South Korea, our order, the Taego order, a few years ago adopted a rule, basically a dispensation, that said, now it's probably also helpful to understand that in South Korea, in Buddhist circles, Buddhist clergy don't do weddings. Right? That's not how Buddhists... In effect, there's no such thing as a Buddhist wedding. Buddhist weddings are something Westerners invented because of this tradition that we have of clergy doing weddings. In Korean culture, weddings are a cultural thing, and the people who do them are just sort of culturally trained, and it's common either before or after the wedding for people who are Buddhists to go to a temple to get a blessing from a monastic. But monastics are usually not involved. Buddhist clergy are not usually involved in weddings. That's not the way it works here, because we have this very different system here in the United States. But the order adopted a special rule, basically, that said, outside of South Korea, anywhere where same-sex marriage is legal, Taego monastics, Taego clergy can perform same-sex marriage. So there's a complete sort of acceptance and allowance of that, which is one of the reasons why I ordained with this order, because they do that. Because if they didn't do that, I probably wouldn't have, but we have this special rule, so that's a very important thing. So this just seemed like a really timely thing to bring up, and in the current climate, I felt like it was something that ought to be said out loud, and I don't usually record these scripture things, but I recorded tonight, and it's going to go online, and because the world should know that this is the position. So this is the Buddhist take on things, and specifically the take on things that we have in our order. So if anybody has questions about any of this, we could talk about it afterwards. If you have thoughts you want to share, I'm happy to talk about this, and we can discuss it some. I'm still just waiting for somebody to tell me they want me to do their wedding. But anyway, that's another issue. So we can talk about this more afterwards. Okay?